So it's right here.
There, I picked there.
Did you
Okay.
do it?
I didn't do it, was on there.
Oh.
Yeah. All right, good to
Okay,
go.
we're good.
The mics are hot.
Mics are going.
Okay, this is a work session for the calendars. I think it's been calendared on both the Planning and Zoning Commission and the Historic Preservation Commission. And the title of this work session is, as advertised, to review Seward's historic district and possible ways to update code. But initially, I am going to start off with an apology to the Historic Preservation Commission, because on reading the current city code under Historic Preservation Commission and Historic District, I was like, where does it say anything about the planning and zoning? Where does it say anything? And so then talked to Jackie, and we reviewed Ordinance 9404, which is not included in the packet. In the packet is 9209, which is what set up planning and zoning as the Historic Preservation Commission. And then 9404 reads, the city desires, these are the whereases, which aren't the meat of the ordinance, but the reason. The city desires to continue its local certified government status in order to qualify for historic preservation grant funds. Whereas a major condition of maintaining the CLG status is the existence of an active Historic Preservation Commission. And whereas because of timing to attain the CLG status and qualify for remaining grant funds at the time, the Planning and Zoning Commission was given the additional duty of acting as the Historic Preservation Commission. And whereas the duties of the Planning and Zoning Commission are too broad to focus the necessary attention and interest historic preservation issues warrant, and whereas there appears to be sufficient interest in the community to warrant what is generally considered the norm in most communities, a separate Historic Preservation Commission, now therefore the City Council, the City of Seward established a Historic Preservation Commission duty, which are what is in our packet tonight, page 6, 7, and 8, is your current city code. It was amended by 9410, which established the historic preservation and the historic districts and such. And then I think that's pretty much it. And so, really, I agree that there's a lot of history in Seward and that we have historic districts, but if you, the Historic Preservation, wants to change the city code to add to your duties and responsibilities, that's between you and the council. You report directly to the council, not through P&Z. If P&Z, like you supported the P&Z's change for the Jesse Lee properties from multifamily residential to park, and you wrote your own resolution, which was totally your decision and your separate act. But we've had a couple of work sessions, and in the meantime, we have kind of put some of our priorities on the back burner, like the Fort Raymond subdivision. I guess the short-term rental issues kind of went by the byway because of the COVID and not as much tourism. But I'm just apologizing that we have, or I, maybe not the rest of the commission, but I have misunderstood or taken a different slant on the way this is supposed to be. Originally, back in the 90s, early 90s, the Planning and Zoning was the Historic Preservation Commission, but since 1994, and I will say in 94, I was a mother of 4 children, I'm running a business. I lived here 15 years, but I was not part of the city business at that time. So I really like the practical suggestions on page 5, but I unless there is a bunch of pertinent information that the planning and zoning needs to know from the historic preservation. I'm not sure how much interaction or work we need to do at this work session. So I'll turn it over to the chair of the historic preservation or anybody else that wants to give input. And this is a work session. Tom's got his hand up, so I'll go to Tom. And then you can raise your hand visually. If sometimes the little buttons, if you're working off of a phone or an iPad and a phone, are just too hard to mess with. So Tom, go ahead.
Unmute.
You're muted. Tom, you're muted.
I got it.
He's working on it.
Am I good now?
Yeah, I can hear you.
All right, sorry about that. So I think this comes from a year ago when we had our joint meeting with City Council. We brought up during that meeting what it would take to start putting some ordinances and codes in place in order to protect, preserve and enhance the historic character of the downtown area, which is our historic district. And that was given to both of us, historic preservation and planning and zoning. And since a lot of this stuff is, I think that planning and zoning is quite a bit more developed in this area of knowledge. And I think that's what the reason for the joint sessions were. I mean, if historic preservation come up with some, and Jackie has some in our packet starting about page 11, some ideas on what we could put into our code to enhance the preservation of our historic downtown. So, I mean, I think that's the reason we're having these meetings, not to try and change historic preservation codes, except that they'll have to be as if we have some kind of, compliance ordinances and stuff like that.
Okay, Tom, but council has oversight over that, not planning and zoning, and if we want to give input into an HP code change, then we show up at their meeting and we talk about it just like a regular member of the city of Seward. They don't report to us. There are some places where we interconnect, but if you look at our priority list, I don't see what you're talking about, and I don't remember that resolution. So if you have that resolution number, I'd be happy to review it.
Okay, well, it came up when we were talking. I missed the next meeting, so I noticed in our resolution that wasn't put into our priorities for 2020. And I don't know why it was missed, because we had the discussion with City Council, and then at the next meeting when we moved our resolution forward, it wasn't there. So I don't know why it was there, but I missed that meeting, so I apologize.
All right.
But I'll get it in this time for sure.
Okay, I see Tunge. Is that how I say your name, Tunge? All right. And you're on mute, Tunge, so I don't know who's got the mute button.
This is Tunge. I'll keep it short. It's more appropriate for Chair Steve to answer. But the basic bottom line, from what I remember, was that we asked for your expertise. So we figured that what we know is historic preservation. We know old homes. We have great ideas on all that, but we asked for your expertise. Sue Ward has her hand up. She can probably explain that a little bit better. There's some conversations of a historic district that we talked about for a long time, etc. And we just figured that we should work in conjunction with planning and zoning so they can help us have the right words, the right language, the right approach to then approach City Council on things that we're trying to approach. So we're seeing you as a consultant to us, and I believe that we were excited because we were told that P&Z had agreed to have joint sessions with us to discuss these things and work together for the betterment of Seward. That is how I understood it.
Sue, did you have your hand up? You're muted. Josh, do you have control of the mute on Sue?
I'm trying to
There.
There we go.
Okay.
The primary reason, we put together, that original packet, and part of the reason that we approached planning and zoning was I saw the sewer 2017 plan, chapter 8, there are several bullet points. But first and foremost on those bullet points was to work with planning and zoning on historic overlay. And that whole plan was in fact approved by the city council in 2017. And so it's very, in chapter 8 of that plan, which is one of the reasons that once we did the historic guidelines in real draft form, my next step was to approach planning and zoning to see where we went next in order to give those. We have to decide how much teeth do we want that historic overlay to have. And we, again, like Tongi said, Commissioner Lebrecht, that we felt we didn't have that expertise, but that you might.
So
That's all.
when you say the 2017 plan, Sue, you're talking about the 2017 historic plan, which
Right.
was one of your duties as assigned in the city code to
Yes, ma'am.
develop a local historic plan that will include provisions for identification, protection, interpretation of the area's significant resources, and
it mandated in that, and I don't have it in front of me, it actually specifically said work with planning and zoning.
not in the city code, maybe in your plan, but not in the
plan,
city code.
in the plan, but the plan was approved by city council. That plan was voted on and approved by city council in 2017.
2017?
Yes, yes. And actually, we need to look at it and update it again. But that was the primary reason, because of that mandate in that plan. We've done the historic overlay. The next step was to approach planning and zoning to see where we wanted to take it. Do we want it to have teeth? Do we want it to be guidelines? That's not our area of expertise. So we came to you folks for some assistance with that.
Okay, so if you look at this document that we have in front of us tonight, of the packet that was prepared, do you see areas that you think help you with that approach? Maybe we could start with those, because as I said, our priorities list that we had for 2020, we've done maybe one or two things on there. So it's and just as the 9404 resolution said, historic preservation was taken out from under planning and zoning because it is such a big area and falls into other things that planning and zoning maybe has consideration when it's the historic district and we want to do some different zoning in those areas, but as it refers to the national or state historic preservation for architectural and archaeological, that's really not under the purview of planning and zoning. Yes, we do present code to the council, and maybe that's where you were looking, but that's also more under the city clerk. Sue, you have your hand up again. Did anyone else? Cheryl, I don't want to miss out on anyone. Go ahead, Sue.
The thing that particular overlay or those particular guidelines are fairly well along in draft form. I think the question is, where do we want to go from here? The Historic Preservation Commission has the knowledge of history, but not how the city or the ordinances work. So I think that's one, and as Commissioner Lebrecht said, that's why we came to you, because that is outside our area of expertise. I had always assumed or thought that we might have a couple of people from your commission who were interested. I would be happy to volunteer to sit down and put something together, kind of hash it out a little bit. I don't even have a direction on how stringent we want this to be. Or do we just want it to be guidelines? So if you buy a building downtown, you can do it, and here's some ways to do it. So I think there were some things that that was where we, and I, you know, again, having work sessions like this, what I found is this is not the place to actually get work done.
No, well,
So I would volunteer if I had someone, if I had a compadre on planning and zoning who was interested in sitting down with me to sit down and go through this and then make some recommendations to the next work session so that both boards or both commissions can actually look at what might be an approach. But we have a broad range right now.
I understand in looking at what's in the packet currently and what you've presented to us in the past, it is very broad and very large scope of ideas. I'm surprised that you didn't turn to the city clerk's office, which, yes, is very busy. They have an administrative staff that can help write code. But what I've, in the years I've been in city as an employee with the clerk's office and on the boards and with the borough is the amount of time sometimes that we spend on an item. I tend to want to calculate how the council is going to look at it and how they're going to take it before we spend the time on it. And especially since we sit down with them and we go over these priorities, as the chair, I think my job is to stay focused on the priorities that are approved by resolution on an annual basis. So, I know that you guys, I applaud your passion. I looked at the calendar. You have a meeting every week. When the ordinance that established you said you had to have a minimum of 2 meetings a year. So you are going way above and beyond the scope of the city code. And I know that you those are things you want to do. Nobody's forcing you to do any of that. So I'll take more comments. Cheryl, your video is turned into just the Northern Lights, so I don't know if you have your hand up. Fred Walters has his hand up. Go ahead, Fred. Can you unmute?
Yeah, I just want to bring up something that gets overlooked sometimes when we get involved in specific projects or discussions, and that is that the Historic Preservation Commission is directed by the City Council of enforcement of state and local historic preservation laws. That's on page 26 of this handout. And under that, we have an obligation to look at very historic properties or buildings and things like that. And in some cases, we don't have authority, the zoning and planning. We go to the council. But in some projects and cases, we pretty much need to refer it to zoning and planning before we take it to council, or let them take it to council, because we need to make sure that we're complying with the state and federal laws when we get involved in a historic project. And we also need to make sure we're not stepping on any zoning and planning issues. And so sometimes I think that those legalities kind of get missed in the conversation, not on purpose. They just, sometimes everybody gets into the local little parts of it and forgets that there are some actual laws on the books besides city code that we have to comply with. And that's all I got.
Mary Ann?
Yeah, I tend to be a big picture thinker, so I try to zoom out and look at things a little bit differently. When I read this packet, which I believe Jackie put together. I thought it was really good. And to me, the bottom line is we each have different goals and missions, and there's places where things come together really well, and there's places where they don't. And to me, the whole objective of working together is to try to make more places where we come together. So when I read this packet, for example, when I was on page 4, it seemed pretty obvious to me that the first sentence at the top of the page is step 1. The following questions provide a starting point for analysis of how these things can come together. And then the next, halfway down the page, seemed like a logical place for step 2, where you do this analysis of zoning designations and see what kind of situations you need maybe to adjust. And in my head, what I was envisioning was that each of us could go through step 1 and step 2 on our own and kind of see what places do we see that we could come together and make things more harmonious and possibly make some changes. And then we can come together as the big group like we are and talk about that. That just seems like a good starting point. So that was kind of the first thing I thought that we could do with this that came out of this packet.
Cheryl, if you have your hand up, I'm not seeing it because you're flashing in and out. And let me see if there's anyone else. Oh, Jackie, you have your hand up.
So you guys can hear me, right?
Yes.
I just want to sort of give a little bit of a background. I talked to Cindy today about the packet. Sorry, Chair Eklund. But the whole purpose of where I come in as Community Development Director and bring planning and zoning and HP together is, from attending, various meetings, whether it be through council or historic preservation, PACAB, all of these things, the common goal that I've received from all those groups as well as council is it's really great that we share information with each other, that we are showing that we have this united front to be able to tackle different portions. And as I said, I think I've said it many times to both commissions, as planning and zoning commissioners, you guys understand how code is done. And as an advisory board of historic preservation, they understand maybe the just bare logistics of what they're supposed to be doing. But when it comes to writing code, I think Ms. Ward said it previously that they're just asking for some insight. So by putting together where we have 3 work sessions to discuss some topic over the next year, because we have 3 different joint work sessions scheduled that was approved in 2020. The goal for tonight was to help HP through our knowledge of how do you go about doing the things that you've talked about. How do you go about making amendments or changes to the current historic district? How do you go about implementing a portion of your plan to make it so it is approved by council or it is recognized in code? And I think that, regardless, I know that they answer to the citizens and to the Seward Council, but we need to, like I put together, these are options for you. I have the research ability, I have a lot of resources at my beck and call to be able to help the different community organizations in how to implement portions of code. And that's what I did today, was just give you guys a general, how do I even go about it because, you know, you guys do your CLG grants, you do those things, but over the last year, there has been a lot of input from council and HP on how to broaden what you guys do, right? It's not just CLG grants, it's how do we affect code to preserve the historic preservation of the buildings that, you know, the city sees. And so I just want to put that out there that, you know, this packet, again, I put in the drafts, like draft code to help you guys understand the direction that you might need to go. And I feel that, you know, that's an aspect that we could definitely help you with in one of our work sessions like tonight, you know, but I know that at the final part of the end of the day, we're not going to approve this. It's going to go to council. And I just, from working with the council, I see them saying, well, send it to planning and zoning and have them help review it. And, you know, that's happened on multiple different projects from other boards and commissions. And so if we can just be able to have sort of a united front and say, yep, we are helping them, and then Sue and the HP commission can come in and say, okay, you know, Brenda, clerk, this is what we've come up with, and these are the, you know, these are the things that planning and zoning says, no, that's not doable. It's just a guideline. That's all. I just want to make sure everybody knows. It's just how to.
Sue, you have your hand up?
Based on that, Jackie, I would be happy for the next meeting. Right now, we're working on a CLG grant for signage and a historic walking tour, but my role in that will decrease as we move through the project. I would be happy for the next joint meeting to get with you, Jackie, and anybody else who's interested, to sit down and go through what you presented and see if we can narrow the scope. So right now, it's one of those situations where we have too many questions. We can't even ask them because we don't even know what questions to ask. So I think I need to be better prepared for the next meeting in terms of going through this and bringing something of meat and potatoes to the next joint meeting so that we can actually get advice. But you can't get advice if you don't ask questions. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. And like I did ask for their draft plan so I could sort of look at it and see how it affects, you know, it is a draft for them, but I did take that and incorporate it into these draft codes because I see the direction they're trying to go to. And, you know, I'm more than willing. I mean, I do have a lot on my plate, but I'm more than willing, you know, to help in any way I can to any of the commissions.
I can't get everybody on the screen at one time, so I'm switching back and forth. And Cheryl, if you want to speak, you probably just want to unmute yourself and speak up because I'm not able to see your face.
Cindy, I think she might be taking care of Gary.
Okay. All right. Is there anyone else wishing to speak at this time? Sungay?
I'm a little confused. I think this is all good discussion, but there was information put in the packet of what we kind of wanted to talk about as a general thing. And I think what we were looking for was just a willingness from P&Z to say, yeah, you know, let us know what we can do. We previously said we would meet together. We're working towards the same objective. It may not be the same exact priorities that we have because we have our own priorities and you have your own priorities. But to make some progress tonight, I have to say I'm a little frustrated. I'm not seeing a lot of progress because for 33 minutes, we've talked about why we shouldn't be having this meeting. So that's a little frustrating to me. I also haven't heard anything from any other P&Z commissioners who might just want to say, we think this is a terrible idea, or we don't have enough information, or so we can move forward. With all due respect, Chair Eklund, I know you guys have a ton on your plate. You do too. We're all in the same goal, though. We're all trying to make Seward a better place. We're all trying to bring tourism. We're trying to bring business. We're trying to make sure that we balance the needs of the private sector and history and all those things. But I have to feel like there's some shred of something that can come out of this meeting where we say, yeah, cool, this is what we need for the next meeting to come back. We are in unity, because that's what we need to show to councils, that we're in unity and trying to achieve some goal. And 34 minutes in, I haven't heard any of that.
Okay, so at the end of my opening comments, I believe I asked if there was any specific parts of this packet that you wanted to speak to us about or share with us or had wanted to bring up. So let me just, Tom wants to speak again. He has been, he's a planning and zoning commissioner that has spoke. So I'll let Tom go again. I don't see any other commissioners with their hands up. So go ahead, Commissioner Swan. You're muted.
I'd like to start by saying I think that getting to where we're trying to go right now is something that's been working from way back when I was on the Historic Preservation Commission. And we ran into just an absolute wall at that time. Nobody's interested in even talking about it or thinking about it. And I do see that there's actually quite a bit of, a lot of people are saying, yeah, we need to protect our downtown. And I guess what I would like to see, I mean, this packet here gives us a lot of things to think about. And I really appreciate Jackie taking the time to put this together, because it kind of gives you some things to think about. Right now, where I think the project is that we need, that needs to be worked on first, is determining kind of what the goal is. Because we can look at all these draft stuff, but if we don't know what we're trying to accomplish, and we don't have that spelled out, then we're kind of spinning our wheels. And you know, I put something together, is, you know, the goal, and this is my own thought, is to preserve and enhance the historic character of our downtown area for the period of most significance, which I think the Park Service developed when they did the their stuff for the multi-agency building from about 1915 to 1930, about that age was our most significant. But you know, we have a large historic overlay right now. I don't think you're really going to get support trying to get the whole historic overlay covered. I think that needs to be narrowed down to an area that I think you'll get public support. Figuring out what is financially viable for the businesses that they can or would be willing to support it. And there's some verbiage in this draft stuff that kind of talks a little bit about what that could be and how it could be narrowed down. But those are some discussions that I think need to happen to determine exactly what we're trying to accomplish, what exactly area we're doing it. And then from there, I think we can start moving forward to try and figure out, I mean, one of the things is, you know, between planning and zoning and jacking and different organizations, we can figure out the verbiage and how to do the actual code stuff. But determining what it is, and that means some you know, public meetings, and it needs to be advertised, you know, and it needs to be very specific. We're trying to do certain things, and then you're going to start getting public to come out and start making comment, because, you know, all this stuff goes back to the public.
Did you have specific sections, page in paragraph of the packet that you mentioned that looked good to you? And maybe maybe you could throw them out there so that historic preservation could let us know if those were priorities or not?
Well, I don't think in the packet there is, I'm not sure if are you referring to like the draft code that Jackie put together, specific areas of that, or are you talking about specific areas of the questions I just asked?
Well, what we have for our talking points for tonight is this packet. So is there anything in this packet that you thought you wanted to see if that was a historic preservation goal, or I just, you said there was something in here about code changes that might look good. If you could point them out to us.
Well, page 11 through 20 is some draft information.
Right, but that's 8 pages. Can you narrow it down at all to a part of that?
Well, part of what I just said is I think we're a little bit early for trying to narrow that down because I don't think we have the specifics of what we're trying to accomplish yet.
Okay.
And so why, that, I just said that's too far ahead because we haven't narrowed down, and I think that's what I would like historic preservation to put some time into. And you say, like, what exactly are we trying to accomplish?
Okay, who can tell us that? Sue Ward.
Well, I can't tell you all of that, but if you look at page 11, at the top of the page, it says purpose. Is that not a good place to start? Is that something that we can all buy into? Page 11, chapter 15, historic overlay. And I think, Tom, what I hear you saying is we need to have maybe a mission statement. Maybe we need to have a statement of purpose. What is it we're trying to do? That's maybe where we start right now. And so in this packet, page 11, at the very top where it says purpose.
Chair Eklund,
Go ahead, Jackie.
I just wanted to let you know that Ms. Cease has joined council chambers, so she's on mine now.
Okay, good. Hi, Sheriff.
And I think she wants to speak.
Okay, go ahead, Cheryl, you can unmute. That'd be great.
You don't have to, just talk.
Oh, all right. So I don't have anything specific to say, other than I apologize, I've had technical difficulties. But I did review the packet, and there's a lot of good information in it, and including what was done in the past in creating what we know as our existing historic overlay. And I think Vice Chair Ward is on the right thought that beginning with our purpose, which I think does, I apologize. I've just had a heck of a day. You don't need to hear all this. Gary's doing well. He's just really doped up. And yeah, I thought I could be more intelligent sounding.
Okay.
There's a lot of good information here. So maybe,
Okay,
go ahead, Chair Eklund. I apologize. I know that you guys are
No,
tight on
sure.
time, and you do a lot, and you probably expected us to show up a lot more prepared. I apologize.
no, this is a great conversation we're having, and so, I'm looking at the top page of 14 under a possible draft for the powers and duties of the Historic Preservation Commission that Jackie has put together, and according to Jackie, she pulled this from other cities. So is that paragraph A, the Historic Preservation Commission shall be empowered to recommend properties and initiate the process for historic listing designation and to hear, review, grant, deny, and recommend modifications to proposals for certificates of appropriateness involving environmental changes within a historic district. Applications for certificates of appropriateness shall be judged using adopted historic district standards and guidelines. So do we have historic district standards and guidelines? Sue,
no.
go ahead.
That's what I tried to write.
Historic district
The guidelines
standards
that you,
and guidelines?
the historic guidelines that you received were cut and pasted from ones already existing from Juneau. We tried to modify them for sewer.
Did she actually?
And one of the
receive it?
discussions we had was, once those were adopted, A, do we want them to be enforced? And B, will there be an application process? So those were things that we had anticipated coming up. But I'd like to go back to what Mr. Swan said, was that let's have a joint statement of purpose, so something that we're both on the same page, and then we can work out the details. But that's what I tried to write. That's what was the guidelines. So the guidelines are already there. If we look at them, edit them, and modify them and can buy into them, then we look at processes. Are they enforceable? How much do we want them to be enforceable? Like Commissioner Swan said, maybe we want some public hearings. There needs to be a process. But those guidelines are done. That's what I gave you.
You've even got.
Whether they're good or not, I don't know. That's
Yeah,
not the question.
I mean,
But they're
Jackie?
done.
right in, Heath. I just.
Jackie, you have your hand up?
Madam Chair, on page 7 of the packet, it does give the historic district that is established under 15-020. And so the whole purpose of page 14 is because after reading their draft plan, I could see that they needed additional verbiage in there to help them with grants, to help them with responsibilities of being able to receive federal and state grants. So the verbiage that I've put on page 14 is to expand what is in our Title 15 already under Established Historic District. So I just want to clear that up. I mean, like I said, it's proposed updated verbiage of their powers and duties, as well as, you know, their powers and duties are listed under Title 230-425, but the historic district is established under 1515.
Sue, go ahead.
And I would like to say thank you, Jackie. That's exactly the kind of thing we needed. We put together a rough draft. Now we need to make it usable and professional. And so that's the kind of input that I really appreciate going into those draft guidelines.
Fred, you had your hand up?
Yeah, I just like to bring up a couple points. A few years ago, this Historic Commission spent a couple of years putting together a plan, which was approved by the City Council, and I think that plan is still in effect. The plan covered a lot of what we're talking about. And then the other thing is, going back to what I said about state and federal, I think in purpose, both commissions should endeavor to meet state and federal standards in statutes, even policies and procedures, because when we really get a plan going and we want grants, or we want them to okay something and we don't follow that framework, we're going to do a lot of work and then have to redo it anyway. So I think in purpose we need to mention that we need to follow state and federal, because they actually trump the city in when it goes to grants or projects that get bigger than just a house or something in the city. And we do get into projects that are a little bigger than that sometimes. We get asked to comment from DOT, we get asked to comment from the railroad, we get asked to comment from airport projects. Those are all things that the city has some say in, but they also are at the state level. So That's all I wanted to, those two comments, that we have a plan, and in purpose, we should have more directly addressed the overall state and federal position in historic preservation and in zoning and planning if they get involved in a historic preservation project. That's it.
Madam Chair,
Yes, go ahead, Jackie.
we've got a little bit, about 5 minutes before we have to go to our next meeting. I just want to say that, you know, not from the planning and zoning side, but from the community development side, I will continue to work with HP to help them, you know, and I'm sure the clerk and I together can help them draft a code that they're comfortable with, that matches their plan. And then when they're complete with their plan, or in a draft phase that they want you as planning and zoning to review, we'll make sure to set that as maybe the next work session that we have together to review that draft plan. I know that they're working on their CLG grant and that kind of thing, but I mean, we've got a couple months before we can start really bringing something, a draft forward, and give our input from planning and zoning on, you know, how it may or may not work in the district. And at that time, they can, through their guidelines, through their request to council, they can maybe look at, you know, sort of like Mr. Swan said, you know, condensing down what that historic business district looks like and focusing on that, and then, you know, later on down the road, if they want to do a historic housing district, how that type of thing works with the citizens and the people that own those homes. So I can help them with that.
So we did receive a draft historic plan last fall from the HP Commission, and it was a draft, and I think they were still massaging it a little bit. So they're still working on that, or do they have one? Do we have their final draft that we could get? And is the historic 2017 historic plan on the city website?
The 2017 is on the city website. They do not have a final draft plan. They're still working on that chapter 8, and I think that that's what Miss Ward and Miss Burnett, Benoit, I was like reading it. But Miss Benoit have been working on that, and so hopefully in the next month or two we can bring forward, I can help them bring forward, you know, a final draft.
Okay. All right. Sue, go ahead.
Just to follow up on that, we have edited it, and I think it's as good as we can get it right now, but I think, you know, I'm happy to have people look at, like Mr. Swan, you were talking about a general purpose. We need a statement in the plan. I'm happy to work with you, Jackie, but we have edited as pretty much as far as we can take it right now, and that's why we're having these joint meetings to see where we need to go next. I really appreciate what Jackie put in here. That was really well done. It was kind of the kinds of things I was looking for. And so I will take up anybody's time.
Sue, just to clarify, you were looking for the kinds of things, code changes?
Yeah, where we were talking about, you know, where to go next. The guidelines are done, but how do we implement them? What is the process? Do we need to have public hearing? What do we need to do next? There is no more editing on the guidelines at this point.
So, just for an example, if you turn to the bottom of page 14, in G, the HPC shall develop standards and guidelines, and then if you jump down to 2, because there's a list, the standards and guidelines may include the following exterior architectural and design considerations: structural proportion, foundations of structures, exterior walls, building height, building width,
It's in the guidelines. It's in the guidelines.
Those
That's
are
in the
already,
guidelines. Yes,
they're in the 2017 plan
not the
already?
2017 plan. The 2017 plan in chapter 8 said HP will work with planning and zoning to do a historic overlay. That's what it says.
Okay,
So we've done the historic overlay. It is essentially complete. It's in draft form because I didn't know where else to take it. So that's why we've come to you. We're now out of my area of expertise. So if there's more that needs to be done, I'm happy to do it. But the plan has been done for quite some time.
Yeah, I got a question then. Has the historic preservation officially adopted that historic architecture plan by passing a resolution to approve it?
No, because
That could be something
we were looking for more input. We were trying to decide how much teeth to have in it. We were looking for some direction. Now, if you want to, we can put it in a resolution as it stands right now. We can do that. But we were hoping to have a more complete document that was going to actually be very workable.
So follow-up thought to that is that the plan could be a plan and then the teeth could be implemented and codified in city code referencing the plan.
Sure.
Maybe?
Sure.
Okay,
Yes, that's a great idea. It's a great idea, Andy.
thank you.
Okay, so it is 5 minutes until our other regular meeting starts. So our next meeting, according to the calendar that we'll be approving tonight, is our next meeting with HP is May 4th for the next work session, if that gets approved during our meeting tonight. Okay, so I don't see any hands. I don't think we have any time for more comments. So we'll move on to the regular meeting that's going to start as soon as everybody gets reset.
Yep,
Thank you.
we'll mute everyone and then we'll be back in about 4 minutes. Thank you,
Thank
Planning
you.
and Zoning and Chair Eklund. Can you mute the audio, please?
Oh, yeah, sure.